The laughter started the moment Alara stepped into the great hall. She kept her head down, clutching the tray of goblets so tightly her knuckles went white. The other servants had warned her not to come tonight. The choosing ceremony was no place for an Omega like her, a nobody from the kitchens with no family, no status, and no wolf strong enough to shift. But Lady Marin had demanded every available hand to serve the Alpha King and his court, and Alara had learned long ago that saying no only brought worse punishment. The hall was magnificent, all soaring stone columns and chandeliers dripping with crystals that caught the firelight. Every noble family in the kingdom had gathered for the ceremony, their daughters dressed in silks and jewels, their wolves practically glowing with power. They lined the center aisle like exotic flowers, each one hoping to catch the eye of the most powerful alpha in the realm. King Caden Voss, the Wolf of the North, unmarried, undefeated, and utterly terrifying by all accounts. Ilara had never seen him. Servants like her weren't permitted in the throne room, and she preferred it that way. She wanted nothing to do with power or politics or the cruel games nobles played with each other's hearts. She just wanted to survive another day. "Look who crawled out of the kitchens!" A sharp voice hissed as Alara passed a cluster of noble daughters. Seraphina Blackwood, daughter of the Duke, with her perfect golden curls and her wolf's amber eyes gleaming with malice. "They're letting anyone in tonight, even the defective ones." Soft giggles rippled through the group. Alara's cheeks burned, but she kept walking. She'd heard worse, been called worse. At 23, she'd spent her entire life as the girl no one wanted. Her parents had died when she was small, and she'd been passed from pack to pack like unwanted baggage until she'd ended up here, in the royal palace kitchens, scrubbing pots and sleeping in the servants' quarters with the other forgotten souls. Her wolf was too weak to shift fully. She could feel it sometimes. A faint presence curled in the back of her mind, but it never responded when she called. The healer said she was broken, defective, an Omega in the truest, lowest sense of the word. She'd stopped hoping for anything different a long time ago. The trumpets sounded, and the hall fell silent. Alara quickly set her tray on a side table and pressed herself against the wall, trying to disappear into the shadows. The great doors at the far end of the hall swung open, and she felt it before she saw him. Power. Raw and ancient and overwhelming, rolling through the room like a summer storm. King Caden Voss walked into the great hall, and every wolf in the room bowed their head in submission. Even Alara's broken wolf stirred, lifting its head for the first time in years. He was tall, taller than any man she'd ever seen, with shoulders broad enough to block out the light. His hair was dark as midnight, swept back from a face that could have been carved from stone. Sharp jaw, high cheekbones, a mouth set in a hard, unsmiling line. But it was his eyes that made her breath catch, pale gray like winter frost, and utterly cold. This was a man who had never known softness, a king who ruled through strength and fear. The noble daughters preened and postured as he passed, but his gaze swept over them like they were furniture. Alara almost felt sorry for them. Almost. Then those frost-gray eyes landed on her. Time stopped. The noise of the hall faded to nothing. Alara couldn't breathe, couldn't move, couldn't look away. Something deep inside her chest pulled tight, like a thread being drawn taut between them. And her wolf, her silent, sleeping wolf, suddenly howled. The king's expression flickered. Just for a moment, something cracked through that icy mask. Surprise, recognition, hunger. He changed direction. The crowd parted before him as he walked straight toward the wall where Alara stood frozen. Whispers erupted like wildfire. She heard Seraphina's outraged gasp, heard the confused murmurs of the court. But none of it mattered. Nothing mattered except the way he was looking at her, like she was the only person in the room. He stopped in front of her, so close she could feel the heat radiating from his body, could smell pine and smoke and something wild that made her wolf whimper with longing. "What is your name?" His voice was deep and rough, like gravel wrapped in velvet. Yalara, she whispered. I'm no one, Your Majesty, just a kitchen servant. The corner of his mouth twitched, not quite a smile, but close. He reached out and lifted her chin with one finger, tilting her face up toward his. His touch sent sparks dancing across her skin. You're wrong, the Alpha King said, loud enough for the entire hall to hear. You're my mate, and you will be my bride. The great hall exploded into chaos. Ilara couldn't feel her legs. She couldn't feel anything except the thundering of her own heart and the impossible weight of the king's words echoing through the hall. His mate, his bride. The words didn't make sense. They couldn't make sense. She was nobody. She was nothing. And yet, the Alpha King of the North was still standing in front of her, his gray eyes locked on her face like she was something precious, something worth claiming. The noble's shock quickly curdled into outrage. Lady Blackwood pushed through the crowd, her face twisted with fury, dragging Seraphina behind her. Your Majesty, surely this is some kind of jest. This girl is a servant, a defective Omega who cannot even shift. She has no bloodline, no status, no... I don't recall asking for your opinion. The king didn't raise his voice, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Lady Blackwood's mouth snapped shut. The mate bond does not care about bloodlines or status. It simply is. But the ceremony, another noble began, is over. King Caden turned back to Alara, and something in his expression softened almost imperceptibly. You're trembling. She was. Her whole body was shaking like a leaf in a storm. I don't understand, she whispered. This has to be a mistake. I can't be. You are. He said it with such certainty, such absolute conviction, that for a moment she almost believed him. My wolf recognized you the moment I walked into this room. There is no mistake. Before she could respond, he shrugged off his heavy fur-lined cloak and draped it around her shoulders. The weight of it nearly buckled her knees, but the warmth was immediate. It smelled like him, pine and smoke and that wild, untamed scent that made her broken wolf keen with longing. She clutched the fabric without thinking, pulling it tighter around herself. Captain. The king gestured, and a stern-faced man in armor stepped forward. Escort my bride to the queen's chambers. Post guards at every entrance. No one enters or leaves without my permission. Yes, Your Majesty. Alara's stomach dropped. Wait, queen's chambers? I don't belong there. Please, just let me go back to the kitchens. We can forget this ever happened. The king looked at her with something that might have been amusement. You think I would let my mate sleep with the kitchen staff? I'm not your mate, she insisted, though even as she said it, something deep inside her chest ached in protest. I'm an Omega, a broken one. My wolf doesn't even work properly. Whatever you think you felt, it must have been. He moved so fast she didn't see it coming. One moment he was standing a respectable distance away. The next he was close enough that she could feel his breath on her face. His hand came up to cup her jaw, gentle despite the strength she could feel coiled in his muscles. Her wolf practically melted at the contact, rolling over and baring its throat in submission. Your wolf is not broken, he said quietly, so only she could hear. She was waiting. For me. Alara's breath caught. No one had ever spoken about her wolf like that. Like it was something worth having. Like she was something worth having. The captain cleared his throat. Your Majesty? The lady? King Caden released her and stepped back. His expression shuddered, becoming that cold mask once more. Go with the captain. We'll speak more tomorrow. She wanted to argue, wanted to demand answers, explanations, some kind of rational reason why the most powerful alpha in the kingdom had just claimed a kitchen servant as his bride. But her voice wouldn't work, and her legs were already moving, following the captain through a side door and away from the chaos of the great hall. The walk to the queen's chambers passed in a blur. Ilara was vaguely aware of grand hallways and priceless tapestries, of servants pressing themselves against walls and staring at her with wide eyes. Word was already spreading. By morning, everyone in the palace would know. The defective Omega, the kitchen girl, chosen by the king. The captain opened a set of ornate double doors and gestured her inside. The room was enormous, bigger than the entire servants' quarters combined. A massive four-poster bed dominated one wall, draped in silk and velvet. A fire crackled in a hearth large enough to stand in. Everything was beautiful and expensive and utterly terrifying. "There will be guards outside all night," the captain said, "for your protection." Or to keep me from running, Ilara thought. The doors closed behind her with a heavy thud. She stood in the middle of the queen's chambers, still wrapped in the king's cloak, and tried to remember how to breathe. This morning, she had been nobody. A servant, invisible. Now she was the future queen of the North, claimed by a king she didn't know, bound by a mate bond she didn't understand. And somewhere in the palace, she could feel him, a warm pulse at the edge of her awareness, steady as a heartbeat. Her wolf lifted its head and howled. Sleep refused to come. Ilara lay in the enormous bed, swallowed by silk sheets and feather pillows, staring at the canopy above her. The fire had burned down to embers, casting dancing shadows across the ceiling. She had removed the king's cloak eventually, folding it carefully over a chair, but she could still smell him on her skin. Pine and smoke, wild and dangerous. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw his face, those frost-gray eyes, the way they had softened just for a moment when he looked at her. She didn't understand any of this. The mate bond was supposed to be rare, a once-in-a-generation gift from the moon goddess. It connected two souls who were perfectly matched, two wolves destined to complete each other. But she was broken. Defective. Her wolf could barely lift its head most days, let alone recognize a mate. And yet she couldn't deny what she had felt in that great hall. The pull, the recognition, the sense that something fundamental had shifted in the universe, and she would never be the same. A soft knock at the door made her sit up. Before she could respond, it opened, and a young woman slipped inside carrying a tray. She was perhaps a few years older than Ilara, with kind brown eyes and copper hair braided over one shoulder. "I'm sorry to disturb you, my lady," the woman said, setting the tray on a side table. "I'm Mira. His Majesty assigned me as your personal attendant. I brought you some tea and bread. I thought you might be hungry." "My lady." The words felt wrong, like wearing someone else's clothes. "You don't have to call me that. I was a kitchen servant this morning." Mira's expression remained warm, without a hint of judgment. "And now you're the king's chosen mate. Things change quickly in this palace." She poured a cup of tea and pressed it into Ilara's hands. "Drink. You look like you're about to faint." The tea was warm and sweet, flavored with honey and something floral. Ilara drank gratefully, feeling some of the tension in her shoulders ease. "Does everyone hate me already?" "Some do," Mira admitted. "Lady Blackwood has been telling anyone who will listen that you must have bewitched the king somehow." She had her heart set on Seraphina becoming queen. She paused, a small smile tugging at her lips. "But others are curious, hopeful even. King Caden has never shown interest in any woman before. Many feared he would never take a mate at all." Ilara frowned. "Why not? He's the Alpha King. He could have anyone he wanted." Something flickered across Mira's face. Hesitation, perhaps, or careful consideration of how much to share. "The king is a private man. He keeps his own counsel and trusts very few. There are rumors, of course. There always are. But I've served in this palace for 5 years, and I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looked at you tonight." Before Ilara could ask what she meant, another knock sounded at the door. This one was harder, more commanding. Mira's eyes widened, and she quickly gathered the empty teacup and stepped back. "Enter," Ilara said, her voice steadier than she felt. The door swung open, and King Caden filled the doorway. He had changed from his formal attire into simpler clothes, dark trousers, and a loose white shirt that did nothing to hide the breadth of his shoulders. His hair was slightly disheveled, as if he'd been running his hands through it. He looked almost human like this, almost approachable. "Leave us," he said to Mira, without taking his eyes off Alara. Mira bobbed a curtsy and slipped out, closing the door behind her. The room suddenly felt much smaller. "You should be sleeping," the king said. "So should you." His mouth twitched. Almost a smile. "I don't sleep much. My wolf is restless tonight. Because of you." He moved into the room, and Alara had to fight the urge to scramble backward on the bed. He didn't come too close, stopped a respectful distance away near the fireplace. But she could still feel his presence like a physical weight. Her wolf was practically vibrating with the need to go to him. "I owe you an explanation," he said quietly. "What happened tonight was not how I intended things to go. I didn't expect to find my mate at a ceremony designed to parade noble daughters in front of me like cattle." "You didn't want to find a mate?" He was silent for a long moment, staring into the dying fire. When he spoke again, his voice was rough. "I had given up hoping. I'm 32 years old. Most alphas find their mates by 25. I assumed the moon goddess had decided I didn't deserve one." The vulnerability in his words caught her off guard. This was not the cold, terrifying king the nobles whispered about. This was a man who had been lonely, who had spent years wondering if he would ever find the other half of his soul. "I'm not what you expected," Alara said softly. "I'm not noble. I can't shift. I don't know how to be a queen." He turned to look at her then, and his gray eyes were no longer cold. They burned with something fierce and tender and utterly overwhelming. "You're exactly what I expected," he said. "You're mine." The word settled into her chest like a brand, and her wolf howled its agreement. The days that followed were strange and dreamlike. Alara was given new clothes, fine wool dresses in deep blues and greens that made her feel like she was playing dress-up. Mira helped her navigate the labyrinth of palace protocols, teaching her which fork to use at dinner and how to address the various nobles who now looked at her with barely concealed contempt. She was no longer permitted in the kitchens, no longer expected to scrub pots or haul water. Instead, she was expected to sit in parlors and embroider, to walk in the gardens and look pretty. She hated it. "You're going to wear a hole in the carpet," Mira observed on the fourth day, watching Alara pace the length of her chambers. "What's troubling you?" "Everything." Alara gestured at the ornate room, the silk curtains, the vases of fresh flowers that appeared each morning as if by magic. "I don't belong here. I don't know how to do nothing all day. My hands feel useless." Mira considered this for a moment. "Have you told the king?" Alara hadn't seen much of Caden since that first night. He came to her chambers each evening, staying only long enough to ask if she needed anything, if she was comfortable, if anyone had bothered her. The conversations were brief and strangely formal, as if he was holding himself back. She could feel the mate bond pulling between them, that warm thread of connection that grew stronger every day, but he never touched her, never stayed longer than a few minutes. "I don't want to seem ungrateful," she said. "You should tell him anyway." Mira's voice was gentle but firm. "He's your mate. He'll want to know if you're unhappy." That evening, when Caden appeared at her door, Alara gathered her courage. "I want to be useful," she blurted out before he could deliver his usual formal greeting. "I'm not suited for sitting around and looking decorative. I spent my whole life working, and now I feel like I'm going mad with nothing to do." Something shifted in his expression. For a moment, she thought she had offended him. Then he stepped into the room and closed the door behind him, and she realized he was fighting a smile. "What would you like to do?" he asked. "I don't know. Anything. Help in the kitchens again, or the gardens, or—" The queen doesn't work in the kitchens. I'm not the queen yet. The words came out sharper than she intended. I'm still just Alara, and Alara needs to do something with her hands, or she's going to start climbing the walls. He did smile then, a real smile that transformed his entire face. It softened the hard lines of his jaw and made his gray eyes warm. Her heart stuttered at the sight of it. Come with me, he said. He led her through the palace, past startled servants and gaping nobles, to a part of the castle she had never seen before. The corridors here were older, the stones worn smooth with age. Torches flickered in iron brackets, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Finally, he stopped before a heavy wooden door and pushed it open. The room beyond was a library, not the formal, pristine library where nobles gathered to discuss politics, but a working space filled with books and scrolls and maps spread across every surface. A fire crackled in a massive hearth, and comfortable chairs were arranged near the windows. This is my private study, Caden said. No one comes here without my permission. Alara stepped inside, turning slowly to take it all in. The books were old and well-loved, their spines cracked from use. She ran her fingers along a shelf, feeling the soft leather bindings, the raised lettering of titles she couldn't read. I don't know my letters, she admitted quietly. Servants aren't taught to read. I know. He moved to stand beside her, close enough that she could feel his warmth. I could teach you, if you wanted. She looked up at him, surprised. You would do that? Don't you have a kingdom to run? I have advisors to handle the daily matters, and spending time with my mate is hardly a hardship. His voice dropped lower, rougher. I find myself looking for excuses to be near you. It's inconvenient. My wolf doesn't like being away from you. Her cheeks flushed with heat. My wolf feels the same. They stood there for a moment, the air thick with unspoken things. Alara's gaze dropped to his mouth before she could stop herself, and she heard his breath catch. We should start with the basics, he said, his voice strained. He stepped back and pulled a book from the shelf, breaking the tension. The alphabet. Simple words. We'll work up from there. They sat together by the fire, heads bent over the pages, and Caden began to teach her. His voice was patient as he guided her through the shapes of letters, his hand steady as he traced them for her to follow. When she struggled, he didn't mock her. When she succeeded, something like pride flickered in his eyes. Hours passed without either of them noticing. When Alara finally looked up, the fire had burned low and the windows showed only darkness. I should let you sleep, Caden said reluctantly, but he didn't move. Neither did she. Will you tell me something? She asked quietly. Something true about yourself, something no one else knows. He was silent for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he reached for her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers. I'm afraid, he said, so softly she almost didn't hear. I'm afraid that when you truly know me, you'll wish the mate bond had chosen someone else. Before she could respond, he lifted her hand to his lips, pressed a kiss to her knuckles, and left. 2 weeks passed, and Alara fell into a rhythm she had never expected. Every afternoon, she went to Caden's private study. Every afternoon, they sat together by the fire while he taught her to read. She learned the alphabet first, then simple words, then sentences. The work was slow and sometimes frustrating, but Caden never lost patience. He would guide her hand when she practiced writing, his fingers warm against hers. He would read passages aloud while she followed along, his deep voice turning even the driest texts into something beautiful. She was falling in love with him. She knew it the way she knew the sun would rise each morning, with a quiet, inescapable certainty that left no room for doubt. It wasn't just the mate bond pulling them together, though that grew stronger every day. It was him, the way he listened when she spoke, the way he remembered small details, that she preferred honey in her tea, that she liked the window cracked open even in cold weather, that she hummed when she was concentrating. The way he looked at her when he thought she wasn't watching, like she was something miraculous. But she still didn't know his secret. The thing he feared would drive her away. She had tried asking Mira, but the attendant only shook her head. "It's not my place to say, my lady. The king will tell you when he's ready." The not knowing was driving her mad. One evening, a storm rolled in from the mountains. Thunder shook the palace walls, and rain lashed against the windows with a fury that made the servants scurry to secure the shutters. Alara was in the study with Caden, practicing her letters by candlelight, when a particularly violent crack of lightning made her jump. Her elbow knocked the inkwell, sending a river of black across the page she'd been working on. "Oh no!" She grabbed for a cloth, trying to blot the mess, but only succeeded in smearing it further. "I'm sorry, I've ruined it." "It's just paper." Caden's hand closed over hers, stilling her frantic movements. "Alara, look at me." She did. His face was very close, his gray eyes soft in the candlelight. The thunder rumbled again, but it seemed distant now, unimportant. "You're trembling," he said. "The storm startled me." "Liar." His thumb traced a circle on the back of her hand. "You've been jumpy all week. What's wrong?" She should have made an excuse, should have smiled and changed the subject and kept pretending everything was fine. But she was tired of pretending, tired of dancing around the thing that sat between them like a wall. "I'm falling in love with you," she said. The words hung in the air. Caden went very still, his hand tightening on hers. "And it terrifies me," she continued, her voice barely above a whisper, "because I know you're hiding something. I can feel it. This secret you're so afraid of. And I keep waiting for you to trust me enough to tell me, but you don't. And I don't know if you ever will, and I—" He kissed her. It wasn't gentle. His mouth claimed hers with a desperate hunger that stole her breath and sent her heart racing. One hand cupped her face while the other pulled her closer, and she melted into him, her fingers clutching the front of his shirt. He tasted like wine, and something wild, something that made her wolf surge forward with a joy so intense it brought tears to her eyes. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. Caden pressed his forehead to hers, his eyes closed, his jaw tight with barely contained emotion. "I love you," he said roughly. "I've loved you since the moment I walked into that hall and felt my wolf recognize you. I've been trying to give you time, trying not to overwhelm you, but every day it gets harder to stay away." "Then don't stay away." She kissed him again, softer this time, pouring all of her feelings into it. "I don't need more time. I need you." He made a sound low in his throat, something between a groan and a growl, and pulled her onto his lap. The chair creaked in protest, but neither of them cared. His hands tangled in her hair as he kissed her thoroughly, deeply, like she was air and he had been drowning. "My secret," he murmured against her lips. "I'll tell you. Tomorrow, I promise." "Tomorrow," she agreed, too drunk on his kisses to care about anything else. The storm raged outside, but in the study, wrapped in the arms of her mate, Alara had never felt safer. Her wolf curled up contentedly in her chest, finally at peace. Whatever secret Caden was hiding, they would face it together. She believed that with her whole heart. She had no idea how wrong she was. Tomorrow never came. Ilara woke to chaos. Servants rushed through the corridors, their faces pale with fear. Guards shouted orders. Somewhere in the distance, a bell was tolling, the deep, ominous tone that signaled an emergency in the palace. She threw on a dressing gown and opened her door to find Mira hurrying toward her, breathless and wide-eyed. "What's happening?" Alara demanded. "There's been an attack. Raiders from the Eastern Territories crossed the border during the storm. They burned 3 villages before our soldiers could respond." Mira's voice trembled. "The king rode out at dawn with his men. He didn't want to wake you." Elara's stomach dropped. He's gone? He left a message, said he'd return within a week and that you should continue your studies without him. Mira pressed a folded piece of paper into her hands. He also said to stay in your chambers as much as possible. The palace isn't safe with so many soldiers away. The note was brief, written in Caden's bold hand. 3 words that made her heart ache. Wait for me. She waited. 1 day, 2, 3. Each morning she woke hoping to hear hoofbeats in the courtyard, hoping to feel that warm pulse of the mate bond grow stronger as he drew near. Each night she went to bed disappointed. On the 4th day, Lady Blackwood came to visit. Elara should have refused to see her, should have listened to the warning prickle at the back of her neck when the noblewoman swept into her chambers with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. But she was lonely and worried and desperate for any news of Caden, and Lady Blackwood claimed to have information. The king's party was spotted this morning, Lady Blackwood said, settling into a chair as if she owned it. They should return by nightfall. Relief flooded through Elara. Thank the moon goddess. Indeed. Lady Blackwood studied her with cold, calculating eyes. You really do love him, don't you? How touching. The little kitchen servant, utterly devoted to her king. Elara's relief curdled. Is there something you wanted, Lady Blackwood? Only to offer you some friendly advice. The noblewoman leaned forward, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. You should ask him about the test. The test? Oh, he hasn't told you? Lady Blackwood's smile widened, sharp as a blade. I suppose he wouldn't. It doesn't paint him in the most flattering light. Every instinct screamed at Elara to end this conversation, to throw the woman out and wait for Caden to explain himself. But the word test had lodged in her chest like a splinter, and she couldn't stop herself from asking. What are you talking about? Lady Blackwood's eyes glittered with triumph. The king has a habit of testing his potential mates. He's done it before, you know. Twice. He finds a woman he thinks might be suitable, courts her, makes her believe he cares for her. And then he tests her loyalty by arranging some kind of trial. A temptation. A betrayal. Something to prove whether she's truly worthy of being his queen. She paused, letting the words sink in. Both previous women failed. He cast them aside without a second thought. Elara's mouth went dry. You're lying. Am I? Ask him yourself. Ask him about Lady Cordelia and the Duke's daughter. Ask him what happened when they didn't pass his precious tests. Lady Blackwood rose, smoothing her skirts. I'm only telling you this because I hate to see a sweet girl like you get hurt. The king may seem devoted now, but the moment you disappoint him, the moment you prove yourself unworthy, he'll discard you like he discarded them. The mate bond means nothing to a man who trusts no one. She left without another word. Elara sat frozen in her chair, her mind racing. It couldn't be true. Caden wasn't like that. He had been vulnerable with her, had opened his heart to her, had promised to tell her his secret. But Lady Blackwood's words echoed in her head, poisonous and persistent. A test. What if everything had been a test? The reading lessons, the gentle touches, the confession of love. What if he had been watching her, judging her, waiting for her to make a mistake? What if the secret he'd promised to reveal was that none of it had been real? By the time hoofbeats thundered in the courtyard that evening, Elara had worked herself into a knot of doubt and fear. She watched from her window as Caden dismounted, tall and commanding, his armor spattered with mud. He looked up as if he could sense her gaze, and even from this distance, she saw him smile. Her heart cracked down the middle. She needed to ask him, needed to hear him deny it, needed to see the truth in his eyes. But when he came to her chambers an hour later, freshly washed and so achingly handsome it hurt to look at him, the words stuck in her throat. I missed you, he said softly, reaching for her. She stepped back. Something in his expression flickered. Confusion. Hurt. Elara, what's wrong? Tell me about the test, she whispered. Tell me about Lady Cordelia and the Duke's daughter. Tell me this hasn't all been some kind of trial to see if I'm worthy." The color drained from his face, and in that moment, watching his guilt-stricken silence, Ilara's heart shattered completely. "It's not what you think," Caden said, his voice raw. "Then explain." Ilara wrapped her arms around herself, trying to hold the pieces of her heart together. "Tell me Lady Blackwood was lying. Tell me you haven't been testing me this whole time." He ran a hand through his hair, and for the first time since she'd met him, the Alpha King looked lost. "I wasn't testing you. I would never." He stopped, exhaled sharply. "But she wasn't entirely lying either. There were others before you, women I thought might be my mate, and yes, I tested them." The confirmation hit her like a blow. "Why?" "Because I had to know if they could be trusted." His gray eyes were anguished. "I'm the Alpha King. Everyone wants something from me: power, status, access to the throne. How was I supposed to know if someone loved me or just what I represented?" "So you played games with their hearts?" "I protected myself." His voice hardened. "Lady Cordelia was feeding information to my enemies. The Duke's daughter tried to poison my advisor when he discovered her family's plot against the crown. They weren't innocent victims, Ilara. They were vipers pretending to be doves. She wanted to believe him. Every part of her ached to close the distance between them and let him hold her until the doubt faded away. But she couldn't shake the cold knot of fear in her stomach. "And me?" she whispered. "Have you been testing me?" The silence stretched between them, thick and suffocating. "I asked my advisors to watch you," he finally admitted. "In the beginning, before I knew you, before I—" His voice cracked. "But I stopped, weeks ago. The moment I realized I was falling in love with you, I stopped, I swear it on my wolf." "But you didn't tell me." Tears burned in her eyes. "You let me believe everything between us was real, and the whole time there were people spying on me, reporting back to you about whether I was worthy enough." "Everything between us is real." He stepped toward her, desperation in his eyes. "Ilara, please. I was going to tell you. That night, before I left, I promised I would explain everything. I just needed more time. Time to finish your test? Time to make sure I passed? Time to find the courage to tell you the truth." He reached for her hands, and despite everything, she let him take them. His grip was warm and steady, and she hated how much she wanted to lean into him. "I've never had anyone look at me the way you do, like I'm not just a king or an alpha or a weapon to be wielded. You see me, the real me, and I was terrified that if you knew about my past, knew how suspicious and paranoid I've been, you'd realize I'm not worth loving." A tear slipped down her cheek. "I told you I was falling in love with you." "I know. I meant it. I meant every word." "I know." His voice was barely a whisper. "And I don't deserve it." She pulled her hands free. The loss of contact made her wolf howl in protest, but she forced herself to step back. "I can't do this. I can't be with someone who will test me forever, who will always be watching, waiting for me to fail." "I won't. I promise. Never again." "How can I believe that?" The words tore out of her, raw and jagged. "How can I trust anything you say when our entire relationship started with you having me watched?" He had no answer. She could see him searching for one, see the anguish written across his face, but the words wouldn't come, and his silence told her everything she needed to know. "I think I should leave," she said quietly. "Go back to the kitchens. Forget any of this ever happened." "You can't." His voice was hollow. "The mate bond doesn't work that way. You'll feel it pulling you back, every day, for the rest of your life." "Then I'll learn to live with it." She moved toward the door, every step feeling like she was walking through deep water. People survive worse things than a broken heart. "Ilara." Her name was a plea on his lips. Don't do this. Don't leave me. She paused at the threshold, her hand on the doorframe. When she looked back at him, the most powerful alpha in the kingdom stood before her with tears in his eyes. I'm not leaving you, she said softly. You pushed me away the moment you decided I needed to be tested instead of trusted. She walked out and didn't look back. That night, alone in the servants' quarters where she'd begged Mira to let her stay, Elara curled into a ball on her narrow cot and sobbed. The mate bond throbbed in her chest like an open wound, calling her back to him. Her wolf paced and howled and clawed at her insides, demanding she return to her mate. But some wounds went deeper than the bond, and trust, once broken, was not so easily repaired. 3 days passed in gray, miserable silence. Elara threw herself into work, scrubbing floors and hauling water until her muscles screamed and her hands cracked and bled. The other kitchen servants didn't know what to make of her return. Some whispered behind her back. Others looked at her with pity. None of them understood that the physical pain was a relief, something to focus on besides the constant, aching pull of the mate bond. She felt Caden's presence like a shadow at the edge of her awareness. Sometimes the bond flared with his emotions. Grief, longing, a desperate hope that made her chest tight. She tried to block it out, tried to convince herself that the distance was necessary, that she had made the right choice. It didn't help. On the third night, Mira found her in the scullery, elbow deep in soapy water. You need to eat something, Mira said gently. You're going to make yourself sick. I'm fine. You're not fine. You haven't slept, you've barely eaten, and the king— Mira hesitated. He's not doing any better. His advisors are worried. He hasn't left his chambers since you walked out. Something twisted in Elara's chest. She pushed it down. That's not my problem. Isn't it? Mira's voice was soft, but pointed. Your mate's. His pain is your pain. You can pretend otherwise, but I can see what it's doing to you. Before Elara could respond, the kitchen doors burst open. A young servant boy stumbled in, his face white with terror. Lady Blackwood, he gasped. She's gone mad. She's locked herself in the great hall with Seraphina and a dozen guards. She's saying she'll burn the palace down if the king doesn't renounce his claim on the Omega girl. Elara's blood turned to ice. She has barrels of oil, the boy continued, his voice rising with panic. And torches. The guards tried to stop her, but her men have crossbows. She says she'll kill anyone who tries to get in. Mira grabbed Elara's arm. You need to hide. If she finds out you're still in the palace, she already knows. A cold, terrible certainty settled over Elara. This is because of me. She did this because of me. She was moving before she could think better of it, running through the corridors toward the great hall. Behind her, Mira called her name, but Elara didn't stop. The mate bond pulsed stronger with every step, guiding her toward Caden like a compass pointing north. She found him in the corridor outside the great hall, surrounded by guards and advisors. His face was haggard, dark circles under his eyes, but when he saw her, something fierce and desperate flared in his expression. Elara! He caught her arm as she approached. What are you doing here? You need to get out of the palace, now. I'm not running. She met his eyes, and despite everything between them, despite the hurt and betrayal, she felt the mate bond sing with recognition. This is my fault. Lady Blackwood did this because of me. Lady Blackwood did this because she's a power-hungry snake who couldn't accept that her daughter wasn't chosen. Caden's grip on her arm tightened. This is not your fault. None of this is your fault. A crash echoed from inside the great hall, followed by Seraphina's terrified scream. One of the advisors stepped forward, his face grim. Your Majesty, we're running out of time. If Lady Blackwood ignites those oil barrels, the entire east wing will go up in flames. We'll lose half the palace and everyone inside it. She wants to negotiate. another advisor added. She says she'll release Seraphina and stand down if you publicly denounce your mate and choose her daughter instead. Ilara's stomach lurched. She looked at Caden, waiting for him to consider it, waiting for the calculating Alpha King to weigh the cost of one defective Omega against the lives that hung in the balance. But Caden didn't hesitate. No. Your Majesty. I said no. His voice was iron and fire, the full force of his alpha authority ringing through the corridor. Ilara is my mate, my true mate, chosen by the moon goddess herself. I will not renounce her. Not for Lady Blackwood, not for this palace, not for anything in this world. Tears pricked at Ilara's eyes. Even now, after everything, he chose her. Then what do we do? The advisor asked desperately. Ilara stepped forward. I have an idea. Every head turned toward her. Caden's brow furrowed. Ilara, Lady Blackwood thinks I'm weak, defective, a kitchen servant with a broken wolf. Ilara's voice was steady even as her heart raced. Let me go in there. Let me talk to her. She won't see me as a threat. Absolutely not. Caden's eyes blazed. I won't let you walk into that hall. She could kill you. She could kill everyone if we don't do something. Ilara reached up and touched his face, her palm against his rough jaw. The contact sent sparks dancing through her veins. Trust me. Please. Just this once. Trust me. The word hung between them, heavy with meaning. Caden closed his eyes, and she felt his anguish through the bond. When he opened them again, they were bright with unshed tears. Come back to me, he whispered. Promise me you'll come back. I promise. She walked toward the great hall doors, and she didn't look back. The great hall reeked of oil and fear. Ilara stepped through the massive doors, her hands raised to show she carried no weapons. The scene before her was chaos: overturned tables, shattered goblets, and barrels of oil positioned at every pillar. Lady Blackwood stood on the raised dais where the thrones sat, a lit torch in one hand and a wild gleam in her eyes. Seraphina cowered beside her, mascara streaked down her cheeks, clearly a pawn rather than a conspirator. Well, well. Lady Blackwood's laugh was sharp and brittle. The little Omega comes to sacrifice herself. How touching. I came to talk. Ilara kept her voice calm, though her heart hammered against her ribs. You don't want to do this, Lady Blackwood. Your daughter is in here. If you light those barrels, she dies too. My daughter is useless. Lady Blackwood's lip curled with contempt. She had one job: seduce the king, and she couldn't even manage that. All those years of grooming her for the throne, wasted because some defective kitchen rat caught his eye. Seraphina let out a small, wounded sob. Ilara felt a flash of unexpected pity for her. All this time she had thought Seraphina was the enemy, but the girl was just another victim of her mother's ambition. The king won't renounce me, Ilara said quietly. You know that. You saw the way he looked at me in this very hall. The mate bond is real, and it can't be broken by threats or fire. Then I'll kill you. Lady Blackwood's eyes glittered with madness. If he can't have you, maybe he'll finally see reason. She hurled the torch. Time seemed to slow. Ilara watched the flame arc through the air, spinning end over end toward the nearest barrel of oil. She thought of Caden, of the mate bond pulsing in her chest, of all the things she had never gotten to say to him. She thought of her broken wolf, silent for so many years. And something inside her snapped. Heat exploded through her body. Her bones shifted. Her skin rippled. And for the first time in her life, Ilara's wolf surged forward and took control. She moved faster than she had ever moved before, faster than should have been possible. Her hand closed around the torch just before it hit the barrel, and she spun, using the momentum to fling it toward the great hall's central fountain. It landed in the water with a hiss and a plume of steam. The hall fell silent. Alara stood there, panting, staring at her hands. They were still human, but she could feel her wolf just beneath the surface, awake and powerful and finally whole. Impossible, Lady Blackwood whispered. You can't shift. Everyone knows you can't. The great hall doors crashed open. Caden stormed in with his guards at his back, and his eyes went immediately to Alara. She felt his relief through the bond like a wave of warm water. It's over, Lady Blackwood. Caden's voice echoed through the hall, cold and commanding. Your men have surrendered. You're alone. For a moment, the noblewoman seemed to consider fighting. Then the madness drained from her eyes, replaced by something hollow and defeated. The guards swarmed the dais, pulling her away from Seraphina, securing her arms behind her back. Caden didn't watch. He was already crossing the hall toward Alara, his long strides eating up the distance between them. When he reached her, he pulled her into his arms and held on like she was the only thing keeping him anchored to the earth. You're alive, he breathed into her hair. Thank the moon goddess. You're alive. I caught the torch. She laughed, slightly hysterical. My wolf woke up. I caught it. He pulled back to look at her, his gray eyes shining with wonder and love. I know. I felt it, through the bond. His hands cupped her face, thumbs brushing away tears she hadn't realized she was crying. You were magnificent. Caden. She gripped his wrists, holding him in place. I need to say something. So do I. He dropped to his knees. The entire hall went still. Guards, advisors, servants who had crept in to watch. Everyone froze as the Alpha King knelt before the Omega Girl, who had once scrubbed their floors. I was wrong, Caden said, his voice carrying through the silent hall. I tested you when I should have trusted you. I held back when I should have given you everything. I let fear guide me instead of love, and I almost lost the only thing that matters. Caden, let me finish. He took her hands in his, pressing them to his chest where his heart beat strong and steady. I love you, Alara. Not because you're my mate, but because you're brave and kind, and you see me in a way no one else ever has. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm asking for it anyway. I'm asking for a chance to spend the rest of my life earning your trust. Tears streamed down her face. Her wolf howled with joy. I love you too, she whispered. I never stopped, even when I wanted to. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a ring, a simple band of silver set with a pale gray moonstone that seemed to glow in the torchlight. Marry me, he said. Be my queen, be my partner, be my home. Yes. The word came out half laughing, half sobbing. Yes, you impossible man. Yes. He slid the ring onto her finger, rose to his feet, and kissed her in front of everyone. The hall erupted into cheers, but Alara barely heard them. All she knew was the warmth of his arms, the taste of his lips, and the perfect, unshakable certainty that she was exactly where she belonged. 1 year later, Alara stood before the mirror in the Queen's chambers, her chambers now, and marveled at how much had changed. The wedding had been held on the first day of spring, in the great hall where she had once served wine and endured mockery. The same nobles who had laughed at the poor Omega girl now bowed before their queen. Alara didn't hold grudges. She had learned long ago that bitterness only poisoned the one who carried it. But she would be lying if she said she didn't enjoy the stunned expressions on their faces when she walked down the aisle in a gown of silver silk, her hand resting on the arm of the most powerful alpha in the realm. Lady Blackwood had been exiled to a distant territory, stripped of her titles and her wealth. Seraphina, freed from her mother's shadow, had surprised everyone by asking to train as a healer. Alara had granted the request herself. Everyone deserved a chance to become something better than their past. A knock sounded at the door, and Mira slipped inside with a knowing smile. His Majesty is pacing in the corridor. He's convinced you've been in here too long and something must be wrong. Alara laughed. Some things never changed. For all his power and authority, Caden turned into a worried mess whenever she was out of his sight for more than an hour. Their mate bond had only grown stronger over the past year, a constant golden thread connecting their hearts. She felt his anxiety now, fluttering at the edge of her awareness, and sent a wave of reassurance back through the connection. "Tell him I'll be out in a moment," she said. "I'm almost ready." Mira nodded and disappeared. Alara turned back to the mirror, smoothing her hands over the soft blue wool of her dress. It was simpler than most of her gowns now. She still preferred comfort over finery. But today was special. Today she had news to share. She found Caden in his study, their study now, surrounded by books and maps, and the comfortable clutter of a shared life. He looked up the moment she entered, his gray eyes warming at the sight of her. "There you are." He crossed the room and pulled her into his arms, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "I was starting to worry." "You're always worrying." She tilted her face up to kiss him properly, soft and slow. When she pulled back, she took his hand and pressed it flat against her stomach. "But this time, you might have a good reason." He went very still. His eyes searched her face, hope and wonder and disbelief flickering across his features. "Ilara, are you—" The healer confirmed it this morning. Tears pricked at her eyes, happy ones this time. "We're going to have a baby, Caden." For a long moment, he didn't speak. Then the Alpha King, the Wolf of the North, the most feared ruler in the realm, dropped to his knees for the second time in his life. He pressed his forehead against her belly and wrapped his arms around her waist, and she felt his tears soaking through the fabric of her dress. "I love you," he said, his voice rough and broken. "Both of you, more than I ever knew it was possible to love." Alara ran her fingers through his dark hair, her heart so full it ached. She thought of the girl she had been a year ago, the kitchen servant with the broken wolf, invisible and unloved. That girl had never dared to dream of this. A mate who adored her, a crown she had earned, a child growing beneath her heart. Her wolf, fully awake now, hummed with contentment. "I love you too," she whispered. "Always." Outside, the sun broke through the clouds, bathing the kingdom in golden light. And in the private study where a king had once taught a servant to read, two mates held each other close and dreamed of the future they would build together. They had both been broken once, but together they were whole.